I can still remember when Anita and I brought our children home from the hospital. I remember that experience very clearly because part of me was scared to death about what came next. How in the world were we going to parent these two precious young lives? It was quite an overwhelming thought. It was somewhere during that period of time that I came face to face with the reality that scared me maybe the most, and that was I felt like we had to do this right. These were human lives. We couldn't afford to mess up, to go wrong, to make a mistake. Human beings' destinies were at stake. It was a frightening experience, and I'll have to admit that some of my perfectionism got mixed in there as well, which only made it worse. Do you remember those experiences, those of you who have had children? Remember that uncertainty about how to manage things, about the first diaper change, the 1,000th diaper change? You remember those experiences? I remember wishing, can we just take them out in the backyard and have them stand up and spurt them off with a hose? I mean, that should work, shouldn't it? No, Anita said we can't do that. The desire to get it right, to do it right. It can be almost overwhelming. Well, it's somewhere during that period of time that a friend of mine gave me a book entitled The Family Covenant, written by Dennis Guernsey, the late Dennis Guernsey. It's a bit dated now, but has very good material in it. In fact, it was quite life-changing to me in one particular regard. As I was reading through the book, I came to a place in one of the chapters where he said, as parents, we often want to do it right. In fact, we want to do it perfectly if we can. We want to invest everything we can in these kids so that they'll grow up to be healthy human beings. However, he said, to have that goal of perfection is utterly impossible. It will only saddle you with further guilt. So put that expectation aside. Here, he said, is a much more reasonable expectation. Make sure you create in their lives the possibility that they can have more good memories than bad. More good memories than bad. He said they're going to have bad memories. You're a human parent. That's going to happen. You're going to have bad memories. You can't avoid that. But what you can do is work in such a way that when they look back on their growing up years, when they look back on their childhood, they have more good than bad. That was a very liberating thought to me. I remember thinking, now there's something I think I can do. That is a possibility. It's not the easiest thing for me because I'm not Anita. Anita has a temperament and a personality that lends itself to that. In fact, early in my marriage, she said to me one day, I know why you married me. I said, why is that? She said, for free entertainment. So I never thought of it that way, but it is good. It is a good thing. So she had many things, many ways in which she invested in our kids' lives that to this day they talk about. Field trips all the time, friends over regularly, picnics in the backyard. Many good memories were being folded into their lives as they grew up. But as I continued to think about it, I began to realize there is one way we create memories that we sometimes overlook the value and importance of. Now, with all that in place, let me share a second reality with you that came to me by way of the marriage and family therapy supervisor I had while I was working on my licensing process. One of my supervisors said to me one day, because this was in a day and time when everybody was talking about self-esteem, he said, you know what? Self-esteem is really nothing more and nothing less than the happy memory of past success. That's all it is, he said. In fact, if people have happy memories of past success in their relationships, in their families, if they have that in the business world, in the academic environment, then when they get into challenging and difficult situations, they can draw on that bank in which deposits have already been made, and they can deal with something proactively with a strong and solid sense of self. That made a lot of sense to me. So how does that create it? How does that happen? I came to realize that we parents, as memory makers, help our children create memories of one kind or another frequently by our words. Oh, it's our actions too, make no mistake about it. But our words may be the single most important way in which we do that. The things we say day in and day out, week in, month in, and year out, those kinds of repetitive words that we speak are tapes, are MP3s that get recorded in their mind. And as they grow older, those will play back over and over again and will come to help form the people they become. Now, if that, as a parent, isn't enough to drive you to your knees, I don't know what else can. It's a daunting reality, the kind of power that words have. In fact, it's only underlined by the passage I want to read today. If you take your Bibles, open them to the book of Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 18. I want to read just one proverb, just one verse again. And yet this proverb is potent enough that it caused me to pray deeply and to depend upon the grace of Jesus because of the truth that it underlines. Now, you know that the book of Proverbs is all about how we gain wisdom. It's about gaining godly wisdom for the living of life in the here and now in a wise way. The proverb we're going to read today is not directed specifically at parents. It's directed across the board to all of us because it has application in so many different contexts and relationships. However, it is particularly poignant when it comes to parents. See if you don't agree with me as we read Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 21. Here's what it says. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it, that is to speak, to talk, those who love it will eat its fruit. They will have to face its consequences. The tongue has the power of life and death. How true that is for those of us who are parents. Those of us who speak the words who from the earliest years of their lives, our children hear and begin to take in, begin to record, and begin to live by. The tongue has the power of life and death. Just a few moments ago, we read the scripture passage for today from the book of James, chapter 3. That's another challenging passage. I want to reread it to you, only this time I'd like to read it to you from Eugene Peterson's paraphrase, The Message. And then I'd like to reread the proverb we just read, also from his paraphrase. See if it makes sense that the same Spirit inspired both of these. So first, the passage from James. This is what James writes. This is scary. You can tame a tiger, but you can't tame a tongue. It's never been done. The tongue runs wild, a wanton killer. With our tongues, we bless our God and our Father. With the same tongues, we curse the very men and women made in His image. Curses and blessings out of the same mouth. James is stunned by that reality, but he's very realistic in what he says. With that background in place, listen to Proverbs 18:21 from the Message. Words kill, words give life. They're either poison or fruit. You choose. Sobering, isn't it? Words kill, words give life. They're either poison or fruit. You choose. The power of words. The words that we speak to our children in their growing up years, once again, become the tapes that will play in their minds for much of the rest of their lives. It's a power, says the old wise man. A power either for poison or for fruit. The choice is within us. What are we going to speak? What are we going to say? What are we going to record into their lives for playback later? Now, you can probably think of situations and circumstances where what a parent said in the growing up years had a profound effect on a child throughout his or her life. I think of just one. Some of you will know and recognize the name Kathy McMillan. Kathy McMillan is the director of spiritual life and wholeness for the employees at the medical center just outside our door. Kathy gave me permission this past week to share her story. Seems that when Kathy was very young, she thinks maybe even as young as 3 years old, that her father, knowing his height, knowing his wife's height, knowing how big she was even at that time, realized she's going to be a tall woman. So Kathy says, even from that young age, he began. He would stoop down right with her. When he would see a tall woman walking by, he would stoop down and he would say, Kathy, Dad, look at that woman. Look how tall she is. Look how straight she stands. Look at her dignity, her grace. Wow, she's beautiful. It's beautiful to be a tall woman. Kathy said, I grew up hearing that from my father and noticing tall women who carried themselves with elegance and grace. Then Kathy said, when I was 12 years old, I was 6 feet tall. 12 years old. She had to have a bank on which to draw at that point in time to know how to feel about herself. Taller than anyone, no doubt, in her class. She ultimately grew to be 6'3". Those of you who know Kathy, those of you who have seen her walking up and down the hallways of our hospital, know that she carries herself with dignity and with class and with grace. And much of that is due all the way back to the memories that were created in her heart and in her mind by her father's words. Think of the proverb, the power of words, life, death, fruit, poison. You choose. I do realize you have to be cautious, have to be careful. Kathy could not confirm this for me. I don't remember who told me about the after effects of her story. Maybe somebody here today will remember and remind me. She couldn't confirm it for me. But it seems that another father heard Kathy's story and looked at his daughter and thought, I want the same kind of experience for her because she too is going to be tall. And so he did the same kind of thing Kathy's father had done for her as his little girl was growing up. Look at that woman, how tall, how she carries herself with dignity and grace. Tall women are beautiful. His daughter grew up to be about 5'4". Looking at all these tall women walking by thinking, boy, I wish I was tall. Dignity and grace. So you do have to be careful what you say. What we cannot miss is the power of language, the power of words that we as parents speak. Let's just confess it. There's power in words no matter whom you are speaking to, no matter who you are. But there is a special power with parents and children. What will you do with the bank in your child's life that is waiting for deposits for one day to be able to make withdrawals? What kind of words will you speak? What kind of memories will you create in their mind and in their life? I sat down and just jotted down some statements. The kinds of memories that we can create that show the difference between life and death, the power that the tongue has. Consider those statements that can lead to life. Statement about empowerment. I believe in you. Encouragement. I can't wait to see what God will do with your future. Hope. You'll get through it. God and I will see to that. We're here for you. Blessing. May God use you in every rich way He chooses to. Appreciation. Child, you have made such a difference in my life. Love. Son, daughter, you mean the world to me. I don't know what I would do without you. Statements that can lead to life. What about the other ones? The old wise man includes those as well, statements that lead to death. Just a few I remembered or thought of. Personal attack. A mother says to her daughter, I wish you had never been born. Humiliation. A father says to his son, when they gave out the brains, you must have been hiding behind the door. Both of those real statements made to people who've worshiped here. In fact, the father to the son, he shared it with me when the son was 70 years old, remembering back to that moment. You don't think words have power? Criticism? Can't you ever do anything right? Shame? I don't even know why I ask you for help. You're no good. Judgment? God doesn't like you when you do that. Words that lead not to life, but to death. They don't have to be big words, high-dollar words. Sometimes they're just simple, brief words. Words that get repeated. Imagine, for example, to a first, second, third grader, if what they tend to hear a fair bit of from their parents, even from their teachers or other important people in their life, are words like bright, kind, curious, helpful. Those etch themselves into the child's mind. What if instead of that, they hear words like dumb, stupid, lazy, ugly? Those words are indelibly etched as well. I know they are. I think of that in my own life. I don't know how old, probably my early teen years, pimply-faced, insecure, uncertain. We were at Six Flags Over Texas, the amusement park in Arlington. I joined a group of people who had kind of crowded around one of the street performers there, working his magic, telling his jokes, interacting with the crowd that had gathered. He looked up at me, directly at me, and in front of them all he said, "Well, I see somebody's been taking their ugly pills, and I see they've been working." And everybody laughed. Curious, isn't it? That over 4 decades later, I remember that with crystal clear clarity. The power of words. The power of a parent's words. I don't know about what else can drive us to our knees as parents, but this should. Because this is incredible power. This brings us face to face with the fact that on our own, we're exactly what James describes. No one can tame the tongue. How can we ever recover those things that we have said over the years we wish we had never said, or those acts in which we've engaged we wish we had never done? It drives us to the cross of Jesus, to the mercy of His redeeming grace, saying, "God, please forgive me. I can't do it perfectly, but what I can do at any point in life is begin to make the investments of good memories, more good memories than bad, more good memories than bad, more good words than bad. That I can do." In fact, I wonder if it doesn't apply to parenting as much as it does to marriage. The marriage researcher John Gottman says that one of the findings he's had, in fact, one of the most simple findings of all, he said, is that they've discovered that in the couples that are still married and are happy about it, those who have stayed together and are happy that they have stayed together, they have found a 5-to-1, at least a 5-to-1 ratio of good to bad. 5 positive words for every negative one, 5 good hours for every hour of conflict. A 5-to-1 ratio at least. If it applies to marriage, could it not be that it also applies to our parenting? Goes to what Guernsey says about building more good memories than bad. So that even in the midst of the humanness and the frailty and the failure that we have, our kids are awash in good memories as well. A 5-to-1 ratio at least. So many good things we did, so many good things we heard, so many good memories Mom and Dad have woven into the fabric of our lives. That is possible by the grace and the blessing and the mercy of Jesus. There's power there. Make no mistake about it. A wise man once said to me, "You know, kids will tend to live up to our expectations of them. They will tend to do what they hear a lot of. If they hear you're a failure, you mess up, why can't you ever do anything right? They'll tend to live up to that. If what they hear from us is positive, is promising, is filled with our belief in them, they will tend to live up to that. Kids will tend to live up to what we expect of them. That's their tendency. And I think of the old wise man's words. Words are power. Power for life, power for death. Fruit, poison. You choose. In the midst of all this, I ran across a story written by a man named Keith Maines from Marion, Michigan, who writes the following. Dad, it really made us all feel bad, said my 9th grade daughter after she had climbed in the car following a recent game. She went on to tell how she and the girls on her team weren't sure what to do for the other team's star player. She was crying, Dad, kind of doubled over sometimes, like she was too tired to keep going. But her coach just kept yelling. Her coach. How could anybody have missed him? He was yelling from the moment the game began. He was barking commands and issuing demands with a harsh, guttural barking tone. And with that method, he got his results. The girl, through tears that none of us on the sidelines could see and pain which we could not recognize, had been skillfully weaving her way through all of our defenders, had scored all the goals for our opposing team. She, in fact, was the key reason for our defeat at the end of the day. Still, despite these successes, the coach kept yelling, and his criticisms for her imperfections echoed across the field. But the worst of it, my daughter went on to say, was that the coach is her dad. I wonder what that young lady will remember. Will she go home remembering, we won? Will she go home to say, Mom, do you know that I scored all the goals today? Will she go home to share, our record just got better. It's so exciting. We might be in the championship game. I doubt it. What she will hear reverberating through her mind, playing back for years to come, are the barking, angry demands of her father. That, says the wise man, that, says James, is the power of words. We create memories with our words. They will play back later. So it got me to thinking about Jesus. What did Jesus do with his words in his ministry? If you read the record of his ministry, you will find that time and again he spoke in ways that left people wondering at the words that he said. People saying things like, no one ever spoke like this man spoke. But he also did something else. Maybe best exemplified, but it's not the only example, by what he did with Zacchaeus, that man of short stature and large sin, the betrayer of his country, who milked the money from his fellow countrymen and women, lining his own pockets and paying the occupying force. Everybody hated tax collectors. They would have called them every name in the book. And yet, you know what Jesus says? When Jesus meets him, he says, you know what? This man, he too, not just you all, he too is a son of Abraham. He belongs. He's beloved. He too is God's child. The way Jesus used words. So what kind of effect can it have? If it becomes fruit, I'll have to tell you, one of the great memories of my childhood came in the years we lived on the island of Puerto Rico, La Isla del Encanto, they say. Beautiful, enchanted isle. Come Sabbath afternoons, we would go out hiking. There were woods and mountains in the area where we lived. We would go out hiking. There was a river that ran through that area, and we would often clamber out onto some of the rocks in the middle of the river. They had some big ones, and we would sit there, and my father would tell us a story. It was a story that he called The Scene. It was a made-up story. Had nothing to do with real events that had happened then. It was a story of us. First of all, 3, when my younger sister was born, 4. It was a story of us when we grew up. Now, there were two things that were true in Dad's scene. The first one was every week when he would tell us the story, we were engaged in some kind of profession, some kind of calling in our lives that had to do with serving other people, making a difference in other people's lives. We were always engaged, sleeves rolled up in the reality of human need. But the second thing, I look back now as an adult and realize to keep our attention as kids was he would make it very exciting. I can still remember those moments of the scene where we'd be sitting there trying not to fall off the rock out of excitement as he would say, and there you all were, coming out of the building, racing out because they were after you. And as you came around the corner, suddenly the worst possible thing right there in front of you. And our eyes are open, our jaws are agape, we're holding onto the rock. There it is, right in front of you. And we'll continue from there next week. And we were like, Dad, no, Dad, what was it? What? No. We'll continue from there next week. Oh, Dad, please. And we'd have to wait a whole week. And the next week, that's where it would pick up. I look back on that and realize the impact that had on our lives. Bending these twigs in the direction of service, of human need, of involvement with other people, creating an anticipation for what God would one day do in our lives. And it was all through the words of my father. Memories, precious memories. Memories that in different ways would ultimately become realities. So what is it that the wise man said? Words, they give life or they give death. They're fruit or they're poison. What I would add to his words would be this. And for you as parents, the memory makers in your children's lives, as you choose which it will be, choose knowing that the grace and the blessing and the power of Jesus is yours. God of grace, we want to choose the words that give life, that bring fruit, that will serve others. We want our children to grow up with many memories in their bank, memories that will lead them to the foot of the cross, toward healthy lives. So empower us. Give us your words. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.